So why this shift toward the positive? Perhaps even without knowing we're doing it, it's because we want to. The scientific studies have been remarkably consistent. Middle-aged brains work hard to be enthusiastic about life, to see the good things. This positivity effect, as Laura calls it, might have evolved for the species in general. By middle age, we've already gathered most of the cautionary knowledge we need. We know what to ignore. The warning systems don't have to be so loud. But what would be useful is the balance a calm and a positive grandmother could provide to keep the group together. Also, it's time the words midlife crisis and empty nest syndrome were removed from the dictionary of middle age. They were good for novels and movies, but actual research finds no evidence at all that crises occur any more frequently in middle age than at any other age. In one study, the 5% who reported any kind of midlife trauma were, by and large, people who experienced traumas throughout their lives. And the depression of an empty nest for most lasts about a day. With what we know about the middle-aged brain right now, the question, of course, is what we can do to keep it functioning well as the years move along. We do know that in middle age, a tremendous amount of variability sets in. Researchers see this in animals as well as humans. At any age, brains vary, but in middle age, we seem to be on the cusp. Some begin to develop serious problems. Others continue to operate with knife-edge clarity. That means huge declines are not inevitable. So what can we do to keep our brains healthy? Do we have any control at all? The answer is yes, but it is not a silver bullet. There is plenty of hype, especially about food, and that's understandable. Some of what we know today has completely reversed thinking of just a decade ago. For years, scientists believed that diet would have little impact on our brains because they thought most nutrients don't cross the blood-brain barrier, where cells lining blood vessels in the brain are packed closely together to keep out infections and maintain a chemical balance. Now, though, we know that much of that doesn't hold up. Nutrients do cross the blood-brain barrier and are, in fact, essential for the brain. And what are the mechanisms by which food might bolster our brains? They involve the same substances touted for years in terms of overall health, antioxidants such as vitamin C and E, along with anything that acts as an anti-inflammatory, such as fish oil and aspirin. When cells use oxygen to make energy, they produce free radicals, molecules that cause damage if they're not neutralized by what we call antioxidants. It is a repair system which becomes less efficient as we age. Also, there's a low level of inflammation that takes place when cells are repaired constantly, and many believe may lead to heart disease or even Alzheimer's. So will eating foods high in antioxidants such as prunes and raisins and blueberries and blackberries and kale and red grapes and anti-inflammatories like fish oil make any difference? Well, despite all the hype about the potential for such foods to help stave off aging in the cells of the body, and that means the brain too, it's important to remember that there have been no long-term clinical trials to test this in humans. But we do have more animal studies that show food seems to help fight free radicals and inflammation. One study, older beagles who ate a diet of high in antioxidants learned new tricks faster than those that didn't. In studies of mice and other animals, resveratrol, which is found in red wine, has made a difference. And the search is on to isolate what it is that works and perhaps concentrate it in a pill. Red wine on its own sounds like a nice answer, of course, but I'm not sure any of us can drink 15,000 glasses of wine a day. But that doesn't mean that food alone might not help. It's interesting to sit down with a researcher who tells you there's no real evidence yet that foods will protect your brain, and watch while he or she eats a big bowl of blueberries or spinach. But whether we can eat specific foods that will have a direct beneficial effect on the brain, the effects of diet in general certainly make a difference. We know that diet can have a lot to do with disease risk, and heart disease and stroke can be devastating to the brain. Type 2 diabetes and obesity in middle age also increase the risk of dementia. In the end, the choice between blueberries and a Big Mac is a no-brainer. But what do we know for sure will help? The strongest consensus among scientists about what we can do to protect our brain is, sadly, exercise. The brain is very much like the heart. It needs blood and it needs oxygen. When you get what you get with exercise is a bigger brain volume and better cognitive function, and it seems to last, something that was never thought possible in older brains. And there's another form of exercise that some believe can make a difference, one that doesn't have to be so physical. To keep brains sharp, it's really helpful to push them out of their comfort zones. Anything from making new friends, learning a new language, or even exposing ourselves to ideas and people who we disagree with. You have to make your brain uncomfortable. A Columbia University researcher says we need to present our middle-aged brain with what he calls a disorienting dilemma. Ideas or concepts that challenge our view of the world. As the years pass, the brain can get comfortable in its cognitive rut. We need something to kick it out. And speaking of cognitive ruts, it seems our culture is in one as well. Age discrimination, particularly now, is alive and well. We've extended the average lifetime by dozens of years, while we find new ways to extend our brain efficiency as well. But we've hardly taken an extra minute to think about what to do with all those better years and better brains. Perhaps it's time to acknowledge that what worked well for the vastly simpler agrarian society of the 19th century might not be the best fit for the demographically shifting realities of the 21st. There may be some folks, even in robust condition, who will be content to swing in the hamacas in Baja, but most of us will want something to do. People want to work, and that is not going so well. According to a 2007 survey by the consulting firm McKinsey & Company, nearly half of the baby boomers say they expected to work past 65, but only 13% of the current retirees actually worked until that age in the group that was studied. Rather, 40% were forced to stop working earlier than they'd hoped. It seems the only thing that's really old and tired are some of the concepts about aging that are built into our social order. I believe that will change simply because it has to. As I said at the beginning, I started my research into the modern middle years because of the worries we have about forgetting a name or getting distracted, and what that might mean. Neuroscientists now know much more about the differences between the signs of disease and what are simply the sometimes irritating symptoms of normal aging in our brains. But the most surprising thing to me was to find out how well our brains serve us as we age. As impressive as the research has been, I have to say it was what I was told, not by the scientists and the experts, but by the people in middle age that I would talk with. They all had stories, some hilarious, of their own brain's mental glitches. But then, with hardly a moment's reflection, I would hear how well those brains were doing too. I could not have written the poetry I write now until I reached my 50s, said one poet. It's only now that my brain feels ready. It can see how the world fits together and make poetry of it. A 61-year-old friend put it another way. My brain feels like one of those blueberries they keep telling you to eat. Finally ripe, ready, and whole. Thank you.